All right. Thank you guys for joining us for our third webinar for Living and Eating Well. This is really exciting. It's nice to see some familiar names coming back. And today I feel like everyone's been waiting for this one, especially, I don't know, any one of you guys have young kiddos at home, but I was just telling Stacy that after Halloween, I feel like I got to get rid of this candy in my house because my 4-year-old's going crazy. But what I like about Stacy, I've talked to her about sugar, and she's not a dietitian that is going to say no sugar at all and sugar feeds your cancer and, you know, bad. She's not like that. And I think that's one of the first things that I really enjoyed and talking more about or with Stacy. So I'm going to let Stacy take it from here. And if you guys have any questions, use the chat. And yeah, go ahead, Stacy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leah. Yeah, I know. My kids are older, but they're still candy, and I'm just as guilty of cruising by if there's one of my favorites in there. So totally relatable. So today this is a popular topic. We're going to talk about sugar in general, and kind of strategies, as well as clear up any misconceptions, or kind of set the record straight when it comes to the whole topic of sugar and cancer, which is sort of a minefield if you're on social media or online. So I'm going to share my screen. Like Leah said, please type into the chat. I'll keep an eye on it so that we can kind of take a discussion along the way. And we'll have time for questions at the end, but I'm going to also kind of ask you questions in the chat and have you all participate as well. So yeah, this is like perfect timing for this. I feel like anytime is perfect timing for this talk, but definitely right after Halloween or gearing up, for the holidays is kind of another time when, sugar can really be in question, but is everywhere. So it's good to talk about and also kind of break down some of the like the shoulds or sort of the overly restrictive mindset that also exists. So that's what we're going to talk about today in our Eating Well and Living Well series. And it's great to see everybody back, or see a lot of familiar names. I know I can't see your faces, but please do participate in the chat. So we're going to go over today, what is sugar? What's the difference between added sugar and naturally occurring sugars? What about sugar in like packaged foods? Is there a downside to sugar substitutes? And I mean, I could update this all the time. There are tons of new ones on the market. So we're going to, kind of speak to some classics and then go over some of the new ones you might be seeing. We'll look at some recipes for sweet treats that are healthier. And we'll, of course, tackle the big question around sugar and cancer. So first, a little science, but not too much. So what is sugar? So first of all, glucose, or carbohydrates, are essential for our brain to function. So we need sugar. We don't necessarily need processed sugar, but we need simple sugars in our diet and in our body in order for it to function properly. It is a main source of fuel. So carbohydrates, not specifically like sugar, like table sugar, but carbohydrates are our body's primary energy source. So actually, energy is one of the topics in our next webinar. So, we really want to think hard around these diets that promote very low carb or cutting out carbs altogether, and really think through who is that appropriate for, really, and understanding, because we need an energy source. So carbohydrates are your body's fastest, most efficient energy source, and your brain absolutely needs carbohydrate in order to function properly. So we tend to group carbs into, there's a lot of ways to think about it, but like the easiest, we have simple and we have complex. And that has to do with their chemical structure and how challenging it is for our body to break it down. So simple sugars are things like table sugar or honey, some of the sugars that are in dairy like lactose, and fruits. And then complex carbohydrates are going to be found in foods like breads and pasta, rice, corn, peas, potatoes, and other starchy vegetables. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a background. But there are some shocking statistics. Okay, so I'm going to put this up here and go over the numbers. But it is shocking how much sugar we eat as Americans. That doesn't mean you individually, but as, kind of averaging from people responding to nutrition questionnaires that get mailed home, on average, Americans consume about 130 pounds of sugar each year. And this is from research from Harvard School of Public Health. So Halloween, if you like Skittles or they were all over your kids' pillowcases or buckets, that's like 2 million, or enough to fill a dumpster, right? In 1822, so a couple hundred years ago, we ate less than 10 pounds of sugar per year. We were eating starchy vegetables, we were eating fruit, but we were not eating as much sugar, like a lot less, right? So our genetics have not changed as fast as our environment has. So looking at, people's sugar eating habits over the course of 15 years, and again, it's not cause and effect, but just kind of looking at habits and outcomes, people who ate the most sugar compared to those who ate the least were about 2 times as likely to die from heart disease. Now, again, that doesn't mean it was because of the sugar by itself, a lot of other factors, but it is really notable when we think of chronic illness. There is more and more research coming out about the quantity and the frequency of sugar consumption and how that is something in your control to help regulate certain risk factors. But I don't know if anybody was surprised. 130 pounds a year is a lot. Okay, so what are some of the consequences of too much sugar? Actually, I'm going to ask you guys to put that in the chat. So what are some of the negative things if a person is eating a lot of sugar on a regular basis? What are some of the things you think are some of the downsides to that? Because there are honestly upsides, or we wouldn't be doing it, right? So tell me some of the positives and some of the negatives when you think about sugar consumption. You can just type that into the chat. Yeah, so like a sugar low, like a crash, right? I mean, if you think about, when you, for yourself, if you have a lot of kind of easy to digest, sort of processed sugar, right? You might feel that energy spike, and then you might feel a crash, right? We need things like fiber, we need things like protein, we need those complex carbohydrates to help us kind of make that sugar last a little bit longer. Okay, so that was great. Awesome. Okay, so I'll let you guys type more in if you want to participate, but I'm going to show, because there are pluses to eating sugar. Like, why do we crave sugar? Why do we eat sugar? Because right now I'm telling you all the things you already know about the negatives. So I want you to think about, when you crave sugar and why. If you do, you might not. So what are the consequences? Again, this doesn't mean oh my gosh, I ate some Halloween candy, now all these awful things are going to happen to me. This is looking at, in that study, over 15 years, people consuming the 130 pounds a year, right? So it can weaken your immune system. We all know the second one, it can cause us to gain weight, especially in the center, in the belly. Can really increase inflammation in the body, can cause you to feel sluggish, have that energy crash right after a rush that we talked about just now, difficulty concentrating and cognitive function, cellular DNA damage, and obviously risk of many chronic illnesses like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and certain kinds of cancer. So colorectal cancer is one that's being looked at, right? Weight gain, the highs and lows, the cravings, exactly. So it can kind of really get, you can get into a loop about it. Now, again, this doesn't mean it's all or nothing, right? So there are reasons why people crave sugar. So that is one of your challenges during this talk, and we'll circle back at the end, right? Because we want to just look at it kind of honestly and understand the place that sugary foods can have in our life. You might not like them, and so then it's easy to kind of, you're not even eating a lot of them, right? They might be sneaky, and we'll get to that in a minute. But for those of you who kind of are a person who describes themselves as I crave sugar, I have a sweet tooth, it's a habit that you want to change, it's important to think of the positive associations so we can really kind of look at that. So that'll be something that you can kind of think about. I didn't even think about, I didn't get into the teeth part. My dentist would be so mad at me. Yes, it can definitely cause cavities. No question about that. Then that's another really important aspect. Okay. Yeah, so good. Okay, thank you, Candy. So I'm going to leave that one up there. So sugar can make you feel good, right? And there can be a lot of reasons why. We talked about it's a fast form of fuel and energy. So if your energy is low, it could be helpful. Think of somebody like running a marathon. You're not, I mean, sometimes you are giving them fruit, right? But we're not giving them like crackers, right? All of the products that you would consume during a marathon, including electrolyte drinks, have sugar because you need rapidly absorbed, quick energy. If somebody is feeling lightheaded and dizzy, we're going to give them a sugary beverage because we want to bring their blood sugar up. So again, this is kind of where it's contextual, right? We want to disconnect like guilt and shame when we have sugar. It is definitely something that can make you feel good. It is something that we associate with a lot of happy events. So things like birthday parties and holidays. I'm just realizing I didn't turn one of my lights on, so give me 1 second. There are a lot of reasons why sugar in our life is something that we associate, right? But it can be a habit. So like if you put sugar in your coffee, if you put sugar in your tea, let's start to kind of take a look now at the different kinds of sugar, because that is something it's not all the same. And that's a big social media kind of myth or internet myth. So natural sugar is found in foods like fruit. Added sugar are sugars that are added into a product or into a recipe. So something added during preparation that does not occur naturally. So like mango would be a natural sugar. Like table sugar, brown sugar, that would be an added sugar. Even, healthier options, honey, maple syrup, those are added sugars. Okay, so this is really important to kind of understand the difference. So foods that have natural sugar, like fruit, give us benefits. So we get fiber, we get many vitamins. So for example, vitamin C, vitamin A, folic acid, those are all important for cancer prevention in terms of diet, important for supporting your immune system. Electrolytes come along with foods with natural sugar, like potassium, right? In bananas or watermelon or cantaloupe. A lot of phytonutrients, so those plant-based compounds that reduce inflammation in the body, that support our immune system. So things like polyphenols, you'll find those in like those red grapes, right? Antioxidants, you're going to find those in pretty much every fruit, right? You can think of berries, other examples, and then anti-inflammatory compounds are prevalent. So pineapple would be a great example. A lot of people found this out in the last couple of years. That really kind of shocks me. How many people, well, it doesn't shock me. I completely understand. It's from like all the misinformation, but people who've reduced eating pineapple, they avoid pineapple because it's just way too sweet and has too much sugar, because it tastes really sweet. Oh my goodness, it's delicious. It has a lot of water, great for hydration, a lot of fiber, and has a unique compound called bromelain, which is known to help reduce inflammation in the body. So pineapple is a great choice for a snack, or for including that with a meal, or something like, again, we learned this, we talked about this in previous talks, but thinking about that balanced plate. So like a protein with a carbohydrate can help keep your blood sugar stable, really sustain your energy. So think of like, cottage cheese and pineapple, right? Something classic like that. It's a perfect example. So foods with natural sugar are going to give you benefits. And according to all the dietary guidelines all over the world about prevention of chronic illness or survivorship from chronic illness, 2 fruits a day is sort of the gold standard, right? So 2 servings of fruit a day. So serving, you don't have to get like hung up on it, but eating fruit twice a day is definitely something that would be helpful. Now, you don't need to eat 10 fruits a day. We want some vegetables in there too, but avoiding fruit is not necessarily a healthy idea. And this is like one of my favorite counterpoints. I'll wait for you guys to challenge me with questions because I love them. But one of my favorite counterpoints when people say, oh, fruit has too much sugar and I'm trying to avoid or limit my sugar. Now, we looked at those slides, we saw how much sugar people are eating, right? Like 130 pounds. Other data shows us that the average American adult is at best eating 1 serving of fruit per day. Only 25% of American adults are eating the recommended 5 servings of fruits and vegetables. So my brain thinks, how in the world could fruit be contributing to our sugar problem when people aren't eating fruit? So that's one of my favorite counterpoints. Okay, added sugar. Added sugar is what we want to focus on. This is where we want to turn the spotlight, kind of be honest, investigate, know what we're doing, and make choices accordingly. And that choice sometimes could be to enjoy the added sugar. That's great. But it sneaks in a lot of places that we don't realize. So how do we detect these added sugars in our food? It sounds obvious that you're like, okay, if I'm putting a spoon of sugar in my coffee, I'm adding sugar. But you'd be shocked at how many places this is. Another common question I get is about brown sugar. Does anybody know what brown sugar is? Like what it's made from? And do people think brown sugar has less sugar than white sugar? Because that is a common thing that I hear. You could also list your favorite fruits. That would be another thing, because we all could use some new ideas sometimes. Like kiwi is a great one if you're kind of dealing with constipation or you just like it. Yeah, Ellen, A+. So molasses added to white sugar is what brown sugar is. And molasses by itself can certainly be healthy. You would categorize that with like maple syrup and honey, because molasses, blackstrap molasses, is incredibly high in magnesium, which is fantastic. It's a great classic kind of sweetener. But brown sugar, similar to white sugar, is an added sugar that you really do want to reduce. That was great. Okay, and then Laura has an excellent question. So is coconut sugar a better option? So what about all these other sugars? At the end of the day, they are all sugar. I'm not talking about the artificial sweeteners, or the non-calorie sweeteners. We'll get to that in a second. But something like coconut sugar is not any better really or worse. It still is something that counts toward added sugar. So it just matters what the amount is. It is still in your body going to be digested into sugar. So you want to count that in your tally of added sugar. But if you prefer it, it's a great choice. But it's not necessarily something that is like adding, applesauce that's unsweetened, or adding a banana into, say, a muffin recipe to boost the sweetness. There's a lot of way to cut sugar, but it wouldn't be a non-sugar item. So I would count it in with all your other added sugars. So that's a good example where it gets very confusing online. Okay, so examples, actually, before I show you that, you tell me, what are some examples of foods that have added sugar in them that's sneaky, like a place, not a cupcake, a food or a product that you wouldn't expect sugar to be in, or surprised to learn that sugar is included in? So what are some classic examples of things that have added sugar? Yeah, ketchup, definitely. Okay, what else? That is absolutely one that you want to read the label for. Yeah, granola, excellent. Beets, yeah, it depends on how they're prepared, but yes, there could be sugar added, or also canned fruits or canned vegetables may have sugars added into them. Granola is definitely a good answer. Spaghetti sauce, yeah, good one, Heather. It's amazing how much sugar can be added into a spaghetti sauce. But there are other options. You can buy canned tomatoes. I mean, obviously in the summer, you can cook fresh tomatoes down. You can also get Pommy, P-O-M-I, or another brand like that, where it's just, from Italy, imported pureed tomato that doesn't have any sugar or anything added to it. There's no salt, there's no sugar, there's no seasonings. You would add your own oregano and basil and things like that. Salad dressing, yeah, that's another good one. many salad dressings. So I would say other condiments too, right? So I'll show you some other examples now. So things like barbecue sauce, or bottled juices and smoothies. So ones that you buy already made, not ones you're making at home. Some have sugar because there's fruit. Some have added sugar because there's sugar added in. Like granola was a good one, and granola bars would be another one that can have a lot of sugar added to them as well. Sometimes dried fruit or canned fruit or things like applesauce may have sugar added in. Oatmeals, like an instant, like a packet oatmeal, there's a varying amount of sugar added. And the government just, there's a lot of debate around the use of the word healthy on packages. So they just changed the guidelines. There's a lot of news articles about this, that many cereals that are, because of their fiber content and other components, have been allowed to use the term healthy, are now unable to because they have too much sugar. I think it was, I have to go back and look, but I think it was like over 9 grams per serving. Might have been where you want to be under that to meet that new guideline definition. Frozen foods is another one, not necessarily like frozen cheesecake where you would expect it, but like frozen dinners. Also yogurt. We'll talk about yogurt in a minute, but plain yogurt versus flavored yogurt is like night and day. Obviously cereals, obviously like soda and juices and things like that. But some of the juices that are marketed as healthy have sugar. Oh, that's nice, Meg. Yeah, awesome. So I think there are a lot of brands. Peanut butter would be another one on here. So like some of the classic brands like Skippy and Jif have a lot of added sugar. But like they have some products that don't. Teddy doesn't. There are a lot of commercial brands like jelly and other things that are making lower sugar or no sugar options. So you should definitely look at some of your classic brands at your store. That was a good suggestion. I'm just gonna clear these out. Okay, so let's go now. This is gonna make your head spin. Okay, so these are all examples. This is not comprehensive. These are just some words that could appear on the ingredient list of a packaged food that means sugar. So you see that coconut sugar is here, coconut palm sugar. You see lots of words here that all add up to sugar. Now, again, as I mentioned, like honey, especially local honey, can be very healthy for your microbiome. You still want to watch the amount, right? Pure maple syrup, that's a classic thing here in New England, can add some vitamins. So that can be something that can be healthy to use. You just want to watch the amount. And we talked about molasses too. So it doesn't mean you should never eat any of these things, but there are an awful lot of words here that if you just looked at the ingredient list, you might not realize that meant sugar has been added in. The questions are not in the chat, they're in the Q&A. So I don't know if only I can see the Q&A. If you're able to see the Q&A, then when you open it, you go to a tab that says answered. And those are the ones that I've clicked off. So you can definitely scroll through and check those out. Okay. Let me see though. It says only the hosts and panelists can see the questions. Oh, shoot. I don't know how to change that. I'm so sorry. I'll have to ask Leah next time.
I don't know how to do that either. I'll have to figure that out.
Okay. But I am reading them all. So I haven't missed any. So I will read them all out loud so everybody knows. So I think some on here, we talked about coconut sugar, which was a really good question. There are other ones that you may have questions about as well. So like agave, all right? Agave had a minute where it was super popular, and agave comes from like a cactus, which is cool. So it's like natural, but it's very high in sugar. And so agave that is added into food products, again, it's going to depend on the amount, but it is not like a free for all. So if you go to like a smoothie shop and you order like a smoothie bowl, I love those. They're delicious. I will make them at home now. But when you're out, oh my gosh, the sugar content can be through the roof. They're all natural foods, but it really can get up there depending on how much of these things are being added in, right? Somebody mentioned beet sugar. So you don't have to memorize this list. There's no exam, But this just is to kind of show you how companies can label foods and the ingredients, and they can all have sugar that you don't realize. But now it's not as new anymore. There is a food label that everyone at this point should have converted to. So you've probably seen this, and it's going to be really important to look here. So you see here, okay, this is going to help. We have total carbohydrate. So that just tells you the total amount of carbohydrate in this particular food and in this serving size. So at the top, where it says nutrition facts, that's how you know it's a food and not a supplement. You would see here, okay, whatever this container is has 8 servings, and they're telling you what the serving size is. So the other thing that's changed with the new food label is that for smaller packages, they can't do that anymore. Like a little bag of chips, they used to get away with making it look healthier by saying, oh, there's 3 servings. Nobody eats a third of a single 1 ounce bag of chips. You eat the whole thing. So now they've had to like redo that, where if it's a little bag, you're only allowed to label it as like 1 serving. You see the calories. Okay, you got all this information, but we're going to look at the sugar today. So total carbohydrate is telling us the total amount, but we want more information. We want to know how much fiber is in there, because the more fiber, the less available carbohydrate. So you could actually subtract this number. So you can subtract the 4 grams from the 37, because we don't really absorb all the fiber. And we know having more fiber is healthy. Now, if you're having like diarrhea from treatment, there's all these caveats we can get into in another talk. But for the purpose of sugar, more fiber is better. Okay, then we get to total sugar. Okay, so we know this product has 12 grams per serving. But again, that number doesn't tell us the natural sugar versus the added sugar. So what if this product has fresh strawberries in it? That's going to make up part of that 12 grams. What if it has table sugar? That's going to make up part of the 12 grams. So the new part that you can look for now on all the packages says added sugars. This is what we want to pay attention to right here. How many grams of added sugar is in that serving? Because that is the kind of sugar that is driving those health issues that we looked at earlier. Okay, so how much added sugar should I eat a day is probably the next question that you have. And so this is the other ways to kind of think about it, but I'm going to give you some other numbers. So for women, you want to have less than about 24 to 26 grams of added sugar per day. For men, it's about 36 grams of added sugar per day. That is the recommendation. And this is kind of what it comes out to in like teaspoons. Okay, so I already told you 1 can of soda has 10 teaspoons here. 1 can of soda, does anybody know, it has 40 grams of added sugar. So if you, and again, doesn't mean don't ever have a regular soda, but for every can of regular soda that you drink, if you're a man or a woman, you are now over the amount of added sugar for the day. So that's not including all the other things like the granola and the cereal and the sauces and all the other stuff. So if you're at home, or if there's, something at your workstation, or I would challenge you to go like look in your cabinets, look in your fridge, and look for added sugars and try to think of how challenging it is actually to stay under that like 24 grams a day, or that, say 25 or 35 grams a day for added sugar. And again, it doesn't mean every day for the rest of your life, but these are things to really start to think about. It really sneaks in a lot of places. So that's why kind of finding that tomato sauce, that doesn't have the sugar added is really going to help, because all those grams add up, right? Or if you're looking at granola bars, or like for the oatmeal, instead of instant, just use a deeper dish with like rolled oats and put vanilla extract in, put some cinnamon in, put some fruit in, maybe add some pumpkin, and bake it sweet in other ways. Or yogurt, plain yogurt, it's going to have anywhere from, it can have as much as 8 or 10 less grams of added sugar than flavored yogurt. So putting your own strawberries into your yogurt is going to be a much better option compared to kind of those flavored yogurts, just as an example. So how many grams are in a teaspoon? I can tell you in a few minutes. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm not sure, but like you kind of want, so like for coffee and things like that, that is a good question. I want to say, I don't know, I'm not going to say, I want to look it up. 5. I was going to say 6, but it's 5 grams. So 1 teaspoon of sugar is about 5 grams. Some say 4. Okay, Harvard School Public Health says 4 grams. Let's go with that. It's a little bit lower. So about 4. So if you're adding a teaspoon of sugar to your coffee, then okay, if you're adding a teaspoon of sugar into your coffee or more, that's going to add up. So it doesn't mean don't do it, but kind of think about that. And think of other ideas, right? So maybe you're adding a little bit of almond milk or milk, to kind of cut the intensity of coffee. Or this is really interesting. So Tufts did a study where people would go, they have like a nutrition research lab. And so Tufts did a study where to help reduce sugar intake, because sugar, okay, Wendy, I'm going to get to your question in a second. That's a good one. Sugar is like, I'm going to go back to the slide before, and then we'll talk about these. Okay, so sugar is I don't want to say acquired taste, but it is something that the more we have, the more we crave. That's one of the reasons we crave sugar, is simply because we're eating it. So when we consume sugar, it lights up the reward center in our brain, like a lot of other things that make us feel good. That was a comment in the beginning, right? Why do we eat sugar? It literally does make you feel good. So then you're rewarded and you want to have more. So one of the ways to reduce sugar cravings is to eat less sugar. And it's not like a cold turkey, I'm never having it. It's to like kind of titrate or gradually reduce the amount of sugar that you're eating to help the expectation from taste start to shift. So the example would be that Tufts did a study where they had everyone on the first day, they had to come to the research facility to get their coffee every morning for the duration of the study, which was a while. I think it was about 2 or 3 months long. And so every morning they come get their coffee. And in the beginning, they gave people coffee, however they took it, cream, sugar, however many sugars, however many of all the things. And then over the course of the study, the researchers very gradually reduced the amount of sugar or other items that were in the coffee, but particularly this was looking at sugar. At the end of the study, everybody was drinking coffee without any sugar, and they didn't really know it because it was like in a container, you couldn't see it. And then they gave them their original day one coffee, and like people spit it out and they were disgusted by it. It just didn't, it tasted so sickeningly sweet. So one of the ways to stop craving sugar is to eat it less often. And so having things out of sight can really be helpful. But like if you're putting, let's say, 3 teaspoons of sugar in your coffee every morning, can you go to 2.5? Okay, then after a week, can you go to 2? What is the lowest amount that makes it acceptable to you, right? Because 3 might just be a habit. Another way you can reduce sugar cravings is hydration. When we're underhydrated, we crave sugar even more. And so drinking more water throughout the day is another way to help reduce a sugar craving. Sometimes we crave sugar for energy. So having those healthy snacks that have protein, that have some fiber, and eating on a regular schedule. So making sure to stop and have some lunch, maybe have an afternoon snack. These are all ways to help cut down on those cravings that are kind of happening because of, sort of the physiology. Okay, so no. So to answer Wendy's question is there a limit on the amount of natural sugar we should have in a day? No, for most people, there is not. And so again, that really means more like fruit. So about 2 fruits a day, maybe 3 is sort of the guideline. Obviously people who have diabetes or other issues where their sugar regulation is impaired, they do have like a total carbohydrate goal. But for most people, having fruit, in your day is a very healthy habit. While there's no technical limit on the natural sugars, even things like honey and maple syrup, we do want to be mindful. You're still adding them in. So it still kind of counts, but it's a healthier source. So if you can switch from table sugar in your tea to honey, that is healthier in terms of the honey gives you other benefits, like helping support your microbiome, but it's still considered an added sugar. So the natural sugars are going to be like in dairy, like lactose and galactose. So that's why you'll still see some sugar in dairy foods that may have zero added sugar. Those are healthy and fine. There's not a limit on those. There's not a limit really on fruit in a technical sense. But you want to have some veggies in there too. That was actually a really good question. Okay, so let's talk about non-sugar sweeteners. So for example, stevia, there's a newer one called monk fruit. You've probably seen there's a bunch of this stuff. So stevia is a plant. So it's not artificial, but it doesn't have calories or grams of sugar. So it's made from a plant. There's pure stevia, and then there are brands that kind of add artificial sweeteners into the stevia. Some people find it has a bitter taste. Some people find if they eat too much, it upsets their stomach. Other people do fine with it. So it's a common non-calorie, natural plant-based sweetener that you'll see in a lot of foods. And as I mentioned, monk fruit, which again is another extract from a fruit, is a very common one that is getting that's like the new stevia. So I don't know if you've seen monk fruit around. Okay, there's a lot of artificial sweeteners out there, or sort of things that started natural, like erythritol, that are kind of man-made in a lab. But these are like classic ones, right? So artificial sweeteners have a 600 to 700 times sweeter taste than sugar does. So they're not like addictive, like regulated drugs or alcohol per se, but they can be kind of encouraging of your sugar cravings and habit, because they can increase those cravings, because as we mentioned, they're hyper sweet. And so your body really thinks you're having sugar and may still kind of respond accordingly. And it can really increase cravings. So, if you had to pick, it's probably healthier to add a little bit of honey or something like that rather than an artificial sweetener. And there are other kinds of artificial sweeteners that can be really disruptive to your gut. So another part of the food label under total carbohydrate says sugar alcohols. So sugar alcohols are artificial sweeteners that are in a separate class, and they are required on the label because they can cause gas, bloating, and like uncontrollable diarrhea in certain people. They're commonly found in like sugar-free candies. They are commonly found in protein bars, sugar-free ice cream, gum. Chewing gum is a major source of sugar alcohols. So in the ingredient, if it ends in OL, like xylitol, mannitol, sorbitol, those are all OL, those are all sugar alcohols, but they are required to be on the label. If you have IBS, if you have gas or bloating, you really want to take a look at some of your low sugar, low carb, or just things in general. And if it has sugar alcohols, that's probably a major source of your gas and bloating. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I can't eat garlic and onions and apples and all these things, first try cutting out the sugar alcohols and really be careful for those. Okay, so what about guidelines and recommendations, and which we kind of started talking about, and let's think a little bit more about the connections between sugar and cancer, because that's a really common question. So how much sugar is too much? So the guidelines are the same for 2020, limiting added sugars to no more than about 10% of your daily calorie needs, which kind of mentioned is around that 25 grams for women or 35 for men. You don't have to get hung up on how many calories do I eat and calculating this. It's a little overboard. The bottom line is that you want to kind of remove as much of the added sugars that you don't need to have. So these are some examples of some healthy recipes that have some well, one of them has, the smoothie has no added sugar, but the others, the maple, strawberry maple overnight oats has about 8 grams of added sugar. So that's still kind of decent, but it's coming from natural sources, like coming from the maple syrup. But you can cut that down. But this is an example of how you can have a sweeter tasting option that doesn't have as much added sugar as it could otherwise, if you're buying something already packaged. And so when we think about recipes like this, they're in the P drive. There are a lot of recipes that you can find in there that I've been adding in, and those will soon be on our website so that everybody can access them. So I want to talk a little bit about sugar and cancer, and then answer any other questions that people may have, and kind of go through some brainstorming around other ways that we can decrease the amount of sugar that we're eating. So when we think about sugar and cancer, how many people, and I know you guys can't see each other's answers, but I will tell you, how many people have heard that sugar feeds cancer? So yeah, I have, yes, lots of yeses. Pretty much, yes. If I left this on long enough, everybody, I bet, would say yes. And that is something that really has gotten overplayed and is very much more in the category of myth than it is fact. So more fiction than fact. And the reason why is that we have to look at the details. So when we think about, for example, there's quite a few studies looking at the intake of sugar sweetened beverages, so juices and sodas and other beverages with sugar, which we know are rapidly absorbed sugar. And those are things that can kind of raise your blood sugar and are those added sugars that aren't as healthy. So people that consume a higher amount of sugar sweetened beverages do have an increased risk of developing certain types of cancers. Specifically, colorectal cancer was one in the study. And you can also look at breast cancer, prostate cancer were two others. Now, the mechanism, and again, these are correlational studies, sending people surveys and asking them what they're eating, and then looking at their development of different diseases over time and controlling for certain factors like age or BMI and that sort of thing. But one of the things that really stood out in this study was obesity. So the people where they consume more sugar sweetened beverages and had a higher risk of developing these cancers, they also had more central body fat. And so is it the sugar itself? Is it that sugar can lead to weight gain, and it's the weight gain? And what is the mechanism behind the weight gain? Is it lack of vitamin D? There are a lot of different theories that really haven't been completely vetted out. And so the guidelines in terms of cancer prevention and cancer survivorship really match the general public, reducing added sugar and also maintaining a healthy body weight, exercise. These are all things that are helpful recommendations. But unfortunately, for most people, you hear this, that sugar feeds cancer, and people really freak out, understandably. So they have the impression that, okay, if I eat one cookie, that translates into X number of cancer cells growing. And is not a direct relationship like that. There is really this idea of the food you're eating over time and many other complex factors that are happening in the body. So just because cells on a test tube slide or in animals, you can really manipulate kind of what looks like a cause and effect, it really has not been shown in people to have that direct of a causative effect. And the reason this is important is that the stress level. So if you are a person who's trying to reduce your risk of cancer, or if you have a diagnosis of cancer and you're going through treatment, you finish treatment, regardless of treatment, that you really want to promote survivorship and reduce the risk of that cancer coming back. If you start to hear that sugar feeds cancer, and you go to Thanksgiving and you have a small piece of pumpkin pie because your grandmother makes it and it's the best ever and you love it, you're going to start to have stress over that. And we know that stress absolutely is something that can negatively impact our DNA and that can also weaken our immune system, right? So it's really a matter of that balance. We're absolutely advocating that people reduce their sugar intake and really get kind of picky about it. Only have those added sugars and only really have that sugar when it's something that you want. Try to pull out those sneaky sugars. But I've worked with so many people that are absolutely dismayed because sugar is everywhere. And so we want to really understand the data and the science and the evidence that we want to have a lower intake, but there's not a causative one-to-one relationship between sugar and cancer growth. It's just more complicated than that. So I don't know if that like kind of clears it up for people or kind of helps put some context in. But there's a big gap between evidence-based practice and with kind of what you see in social media and online when it comes to that topic specifically. Okay, so tell me what questions you have about that or challenges, which are very welcome. And I would also like to know, based on all of this, what are some ideas that you may have in terms of swaps that you could make at home? So what are some things now that you enjoy that you think are higher in sugar, and what might be an alternative based on what you've learned today that you're thinking about trying? So one thing I would definitely encourage would be like if you like bars, like granola bars, to kind of go and look at those. Monk fruit. Yeah, monk fruit is definitely something to try, and it's much more common. Ooh, alcohol. That's such a good question. Um, yes. Okay. So two things. One is that alcohol is metabolized into sugar in the body. So alcohol, just like sugar, are things that can increase your triglyceride levels, which is like a type of cholesterol, so to say, that's in your cholesterol panel. So all alcohol, regardless of whether it is wine or beer or hard alcohol, like a spirit, that all does get metabolized into sugar in your body. So if you're going out to dinner and there is dessert, there are drinks, you can kind of prioritize around that. Many drinks like cocktails have a ton of added sugar, like a lot. It's shocking. So a lot of the cocktails that are sweet, and even some that you don't realize how sweet they are, have a fair amount of added sugar in them. So if you are making something at home for a party, you can kind of adjust that. If you're going out, then you're trying to limit your sugar intake and you want to have vodka, for example, you might want to try that with like seltzer water and lime or something like that instead of a traditional cocktail like a Manhattan, a Cosmopolitan. Like all these drinks have a lot of added syrup. Anything that says syrup, remember that list is going to be additional sugar on top of the contribution from the alcohol itself. So yeah, and we know that excessive alcohol intake or even frequent alcohol intake is a risk factor for many kinds of cancers like breast cancer and esophageal cancer, gastric cancer, things like that. So yeah, great question. Pumpkin bread instead of a candy bar, that is a great idea. And if you make the pumpkin bread yourself, you can really cut down on sugar. So one trick in baking I like to do is I will when my kids were really little, I took all the sugar out. As they got older, they could vocalize their preferences a little bit more. So Instead of cutting it all out completely, I would drop it significantly. So I might do a little bit of sugar, but then I add in things like mashed up banana, pumpkin, like mashed up pumpkin, unsweetened applesauce. These are all helpful things you can put into like a muffin or a type of bread, to help cut down on the amount of sugar. Maybe switching to like, some dark chocolate pieces that can also, significantly cut the amount of sugar. So in baking, leveraging the like banana and the applesauce can really make a big difference because it tastes really sweet, and it's delicious. Or like, I took like after apple picking, or just because they're all over the grocery store, I took a lot of apples, chopped them up, put some cinnamon, some vanilla, and a little bit of honey, and bake that until it got like mushy. And then I can take a scoop of that and put that in my oatmeal, put that on yogurt. I could bake with that, and it's so sweet, but I really didn't use very much honey at all. And most of that sweetness is coming from the fruits. Dried fruit with no sugar, thinking about dates. Yeah. So Wendy, great question. So yes. So looking at dried fruit, ideally sulfite free, because that can be irritating for people, and dried fruit without added sugar. So dried fruit without added sugar is still naturally going to have a little more sugar than a fresh fruit, simply because all the water is gone. So by volume. So if you thought of like those serving sizes, for example, like mango, a half a cup of chopped up fresh mango is considered a serving of fruit, where a quarter cup of dried fruit is that equivalent serving, because the dried fruit is more condensed. So you're going to want to eat less dried fruit portion wise than fresh fruit, but that's a great idea. And a dried fruit without added sugar, again, you could put that into a baked good. You could have some dates with like, put peanut butter inside if you like salty sweet, or put dark chocolate inside if you want more sweet. But yeah, if you had a couple of dates, instead of having like a granola bar with a lot of added sugar, or instead of having for sure like candy or coffee with a lot of sugar, say in the afternoon, that would really be a great idea to sweeten it up in a healthy way. Because dates have fiber, they have potassium, they have other nutrients that are healthy. And dates are another great way to sweeten up like a smoothie. So if you don't like banana, or you want to try something different, you could try some dates in there. And dried fruit can definitely count towards your like fruit during the day. You just want to find those ones without the added sugars in them. But that's a great suggestion. And yeah, dates really can become like nature's candy. They're so good. Okay, so what about, Meg is asking, are there good sugar substitutes, and are erythritol and stevia okay? So yeah, they're just different. So erythritol starts out from fruit and is then kind of manufactured in a facility. So people tolerate erythritol better than they tolerate like sorbitol or some of the other ones like xylitol. But some people with the IBS or who have a sensitive gut, then the erythritol kind of still bothers them. So you have to kind of see for yourself. Stevia is definitely an okay option. The monk fruit is an okay option. So I think those three, personally, like, again, it's just your gut, so I would put the erythritol maybe like lower down, but stevia, monk fruit, and erythritol are certainly things to explore. But then looking for like the dried fruit or the fresh fruit, as a substitute, but those would certainly be better tolerated or healthier than like Splenda or I can't think of it, Sweet and Low or NutraSweet, or or sorbitol, or any of those ones. Awesome, great. So I think one of the things you want to think about as we're kind of we're already in like sugar season here, again, is really like prioritizing the things you love and looking for ways to make some of these healthy swaps that are still going to be very enjoyable, very fun, very vibrant. And I encourage you to share them with each other. Would be great, if you're back next month when we talk about energy, to kind of share any sugar swaps that you might have made, or any places you were surprised that you found added sugars. That's going to be a fun challenge when you go home, or if you're at home and you get off this, to go kind of snoop around other than the Halloween candy, and see what you might find. Great. So any other questions? Our next event, just to give you the date, is going to be on December 13th at 4 p.m. And we're going to be talking about nutrition for energy and sleep. And we'll be going through a sleep worksheet together and really talking about how nutrition relates to both of those important topics. So thank you so much. It was really great to have everybody here today. Really appreciate everybody's questions and everybody participating. So I hope that you guys have a really great next couple weeks, and I will look forward to seeing you in December. Happy Thanksgiving, because I won't see you before then.